With the Premier League season finally finished, and I don't know why I'm talking about it as if it only finished yesterday, when in actual fact it finished a week and a half ago. I'm just very late with this video, but nevertheless, I thought we could have a discussion around how we think each Premier League club got on this season, and what better way to do it than a good old-fashioned tier list. I love a tier list. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to rank off all 20 Premier League clubs and how we think they performed this season. Before we get into it, I've got two things I need to address. Number one, it's a favour. If you're yet to subscribe to the channel, please do. We're getting close to 4,000 subscribers, and when we hit that little milestone, I will be happy. It'll make me feel good. But also, please do drop a like on the video by clicking the thumbs up. That's completely free, and it takes 2 seconds, and it helps the channel out a lot. Basically, the more people likes the video, the more chances YouTube are to recommend the video to people who are yet to have watched this channel. Hopefully, that makes sense. Number two, as it's a relatively new channel, we are still establishing words and phrases associated with the channel. We've already got some. We've got meh, which just means average. We've got I don't subscribe to that, or I subscribe to that, which means I agree or disagree. We've got don't be shy, and that's one I will be saying today, and I encourage you to get involved in the comments, and I would like if you could do that today as well. Let me know where you would rank every Premier League club going by my tier categories. And speaking of tier categories, I am introducing a new word in this video. This is the debut for a new word that's going to be sticking around on Tartan going into next season. That word is stinky. It's the bottom tier. Just above that, we've got pretty poor. Then we've got meh, which means average. Then we've got decent and fantastic. I think they're all self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through them. But stinky is the bottom tier, and it's going to be sticking around on Tartan next season. Hopefully, not describing my team or your team, but it does describe Manchester United's season. My word, they've been awful. They finished 15th. I actually think they were lucky to finish 15th. 42 points, 23 points behind Nottingham Forest, who finished in the European spots. 42 points, they got half the total of what Liverpool got. They were leading in games less than Ipswich Town as a percentage. So just 14% of games, of their entire game time this season, Man United were winning for 14% of their games. They've been horrific. They were better under Ten Hag than Ruben Amorim. He's come in. They've continued to be terrible. They're trying to sell a lot of players this summer. Quite frankly, I think Zippo's Circus is the only ones interested in 1 or 2 players leaving Old Trafford this summer. Now, they've made some good signings, or they're going to make a second good signing as well, but we're not talking about the summer transfer window. We're talking about last season. Now, they lost the Europa League final. That would have been a saving grace, but they were bad. They were really bad. This is the worst I've ever seen Manchester United, and I'm not going to lie, 7-year-old Gio is loving this. This is what 7-year-old Gio wished for on the playground, surrounded by Man United fans, kids in Man United shirts. He would be proud today. He would be pleased. Do you know what? Actually, Gio today is pleased with how Man U are struggling. They're going in stinky. As for Bournemouth, I'm going to pop them up in decent. At one point, they were doing fantastic, but they've had a big drop-off towards the end of the season. But nevertheless, finishing 9th in the Premier League this season, it's been a really good season for them under Areola. I think the injury of Ryan Christie really derailed their season right at the end as well. They were in with a shout of finishing 8th, which at that point could have been. Now, we know today it's not European football, but for a long time it was the belief that 8th place could be European football. In Bournemouth, at times it was in their hands. They played good football, but just a quiet end. Lost some key players. It'll be interesting to see how they get on next season. I do worry a little bit for them, but then I'm seeing players are linked to in the summer. I'm thinking, actually, they'll be more than fine. Their recruitment will be okay. But as for last season, I think Bournemouth have had a decent season. Now, as for Arsenal, it's a bit of a strange one, really, because finished 2nd in the Premier League. Champions League, they got knocked out by PSG, who went on to win it. There's no shame in that, really. By the way, I'm not leaving Arsenal and I've just dropped them there for the time being. But the reality is, they never got close to laying a glove on Liverpool in the title race. They haven't got close to winning silverware, and that has to be the benchmark for Arsenal. Have you won silverware? They've spent hundreds of millions under Arteta. When you look at the drop-off of their performance from last season, as in 23-24 to the one that's just finished in their points tally in the Premier League, it's quite significant, actually. I know they've had injuries, but I do think there's been a bit of gaslighting by Arteta going on, actually. Arteta keeps on going on about injuries, and we've had so much injury. I think other teams have had injuries. Also, when you look at the injury data, I think they're like third or fourth in the league. So they have had a lot. But one of the players that was out for the entire season was Tomiyasu. I don't think you can look at injuries through how many games were missed by players out. You've got to look at which players were missing as well. Because for most of the season, Declan Rice has been available, Gabriel's been available, Saliba's been available, Raya's been available. They're keepers. Yes, they were missing, Havertz and Jesus, but they had an opportunity to address that in January and ultimately chose not to. So I've got little sympathy when it comes to that side of it. And I think Arteta's been trying to gaslight people with how much injuries have impacted his team. He blatantly lied at one point and said, well, if we were doing this a couple of seasons ago, we'd be top or whatever. You wouldn't. You would have been like third. You'd been worse off. I think they have to go in pretty poor. Because I think at Arsenal, you have to expect silverware. There wasn't any. But not only was there not any, they didn't get close to any. They've been waiting for years now. They've been waiting for Man City to drop off. Man City did drop off, but they were not there to take advantage of it. It's been a poor season a pretty poor season as far as I'm concerned for Arsenal. Southampton, look, they have to go in stinky. Now, a large part of my tier list is going to be based on my own expectations, pre-season. What did I think this team could go on and achieve? I thought Southampton would get relegated. I thought Southampton would finish 20th. So that part of it, I'm not surprised. But they got 12 points. They won 2 games all season. 2 games. You get 4 fixtures against Ipswich and Leicester. They've won 2 matches. 12 points. They've lost more matches than any other team has ever done in a 38 match season. Relegated the earliest from any team in history. They got relegated earlier than Derby County did, who have the record for the lowest points tally ever in the Premier League with 11 points, 1 point less than the Southampton team. Russell Martin tried to play his, let's call it the Hollywood style of football with championship players, didn't work. Then they got Juric in, who it felt like a strange appointment from the outside looking in. You get in someone that's going to keep you up or build for next season in championship. They got a manager that did neither. Really badly managed by the board of Southampton, really badly performed by the Southampton players on the pitch and also the man in the dugout as well. What a stinky season for the Saints. Aston Villa, it's got to be decent for me. Just missing out on Champions League football. FA Cup semi-finalists as favourites, I think that's fair to say. And that was one of the most disappointing performances I've seen from a team this season. Crystal Palace blew them away at Wembley. Quarterfinals of the Champions League, getting knocked out by PSG, no shame in that. But they gave PSG a run for their money as well. I think they've had a really solid season, Aston Villa. A lot of football to play as well. To go those far in those competitions, that's a lot of football. That's a lot of stress on your squad as well. And I think they've done really well, all things considered. Played some good football at times too. Just unlucky, I think, to not achieve more. But going back to expectations, I think qualifying for European football should be the aim for Aston Villa. They've achieved that. So as far as I'm concerned, they've done what they had to do this season. Anything else was a bonus, but actually they got really close to overachieving to some extent. So I think they've had a decent season. I'm going to put Aston Villa in the second tier. As for Liverpool, straight up at the top and fantastic. Winning the Premier League, but not just winning it, entertaining as well. In 31 of the 38 games, they scored at least 2 goals. So that is fantastic. That's a record high in the Premier League, by the way. No other teams achieved such a high portion of games where they've scored at least twice. It's fantastic. You look at individually that team as well in terms of the season awards. Gravenberch, Young Player of the Year. Salah, Player of the Year. Salah, top goal scorer. Van Dijk's had a really good season. It's been a fantastic season at Anfield, winning the league. And they were that good. You think they start as favourites next season. It doesn't feel like a one-off. It feels sustainable. Arne Slot done fantastically well in his first season at Liverpool. They have to go in the top category as far as I'm concerned. Right then, next up we've got Brentford. I'm going to put them in decent. I think they've had a really good season. Finishing up 10th, which, you know, they came out that international break. And I always think in years gone by, Brentford are one of the first teams on the beach. That was not the case this season gone past. They came out, it just continued in fantastic form. And were very unlucky not to finish 8th in the end. But Bournemouth's been in great form. Wissa, Shada, Thomas Frank's been scoring goals. In fact, the GTEC Community Stadium's seen more goals than any other stadium this season in the Premier League. That's what you want as a football fan, isn't it? Goals. Granted, some games it was the opponent scoring as well. But you want entertainment. Thomas Frank gave it to them in the form of goals. And when you look at the squad available to him, it's an okay squad. Is it the 10th best squad in the Premier League? I'm not so sure it is. I'm not so sure it's that high. Frank's an excellent manager. I think Brentford have got some wonderful players, and I think we've seen that this season. I think they've had a decent season. I'm going to put Brighton next to them as well, who finished the season in 8th. But let me just double check my notes here. Here's a question. Nottingham Forest were 7th, Brighton were 8th. What do you think the points gap was? 4 points. If the season had 40 matches, I think Brighton overtake Nottingham Forest. Now, obviously, that's a bit depends on fixtures and stuff. I appreciate that's a bit of a wild thing to say, but my point is, Brighton had momentum, and I don't think Nottingham Forest did come the end of the season. But I think Brighton have had a really good season, especially when you take into consideration they had a lot of changes last summer. New manager, not just a new manager in Herzler, the youngest ever manager in the Premier League. But not only that, they had real injuries, right? Compared to them, Brighton had real injuries. You look at the players, you think of Brighton's best team. Pretty much every player at some point had an injury during the season. O'Reilly's been out. There's been a lot of the players out for most, if not all, the season. Van Heck missed a period of games as well. They've had injuries at Brighton, and I think they've done really well. Got off to a good start. Then they had a bit of a dip just before Christmas, if I remember correctly. And then after Christmas, they started performing really well, and they've maintained that. And I found them hard to judge throughout the season because there'd be weekends coming up. I'm thinking, oh, Brighton will win, and they'll lose. And then I'm like, well, I don't trust you now, so I think you're going to lose the next couple, and they win them both. They've been a really hard team for me to gauge. But now, emotions removed, and we can look back over the course of 38 games. I think they've had a good season. Now, some will say, oh, they've only just missed out on European football, because obviously we thought 8th place could be European football, and if Man City beaten Crystal Palace in the FA Cup final, it would have been. Or if Chelsea finished outside the top 5, they finished 6th or 7th, it would have been. But this season was a bit different because 5th place was Champions League football. Traditionally, that isn't the case, and the lowest it can go is down to 7th. So I don't think they were, in some regards, they were unlucky not to get it, but in others, had they got it, I think they would have been lucky, and I think that overrides the unlucky vibe I've got from them. But I think they've had a good season, and I'm looking forward to seeing Brighton next season, actually. I think with the right transfer window, and because they've got no European football, I think they might have an advantage over other clubs who will have the same aspirations of finishing in the top 6-7 of the Premier League. Right, Nottingham Forest, they're going straight in at the top for me. Absolutely fantastic. Now, if you're a Nottingham Forest fan, and you're allowed to feel whatever you feel. If you feel like you've had an incredible season and you're really proud, that's okay. If you feel a bit disappointed because you were in the top 3 pretty much all season, then right at the end, I don't want to use the phrase bottled it. I think that's harsh for Nottingham Forest, but you just lost form. Teams found you out, fatigue kicked in, whatever you want to use. I think there's an element of both there. But you dropped out the top 4, you dropped out the top 5, and then you didn't even finish 6th and get Europa League. You ended up having to settle for Conference League football. So if you feel disappointed, you've gone from Champions League to Conference League in a matter of weeks, right at the death. That's okay. You're allowed to feel like that as well. I think you're allowed to feel both. And I think that is how I feel looking at Nottingham Forest. I think, wow, what a fantastic season they've had. I thought they'd be 14th, 15th in the Premier League this season. So to qualify for European football, I think they've done tremendous. But given they were in the top three for so long, and there's a few games at the end of the season, like against Crystal Palace, where they just didn't turn up. They weren't at their best. So there's an element of me that's disappointed that they didn't quite make it, and perhaps they should have done because of the opportunity that they'd given themselves. So I feel like they've overachieved to give themselves a fantastic opportunity. Then in the last few weeks of the season, I think they've almost underachieved, and they've ended up with what will be seen as the consolation prize to some extent. However, going back to expectations, they've had a wonderful season, and I make them favourites to go and win the Conference League next season. I hope they do it. And depending on what happens in the transfer window, I don't see any reason why they can't do it either. It will be difficult for them to navigate European football in the Premier League because I think their squad's a bit light. But they can address that this summer if they choose to. But also with Conference League football, I don't think you need the strongest squad to get through the group stage anyway. But Nottingham Forest this season, absolutely fantastic. Right, Fulham, I'm going to put them in May, my first team to go in there. Now, sitting in 11th place, you might think, hang on a minute, you got 10th place decent, so is Fulham not decent? I feel like it's a missed opportunity. I think they've dropped the most points out of any team in the Premier League this season. If not, they'll be second. And I think the opportunity for them to finish higher in 8th was there. And there's been a lot of games I've watched them where they've come away with a point, but actually I think they should maybe have came away with 3. Or they've got beaten, actually I think they should have joined the game. And they've had a good season. I'm putting them in May for average because I think that at times it's been a good season. Not bad. It's certainly not a bad season for them. It's just their record points total. If it isn't, it's not far off. So by that aspect, it's a good season. But do they have the 11th best team squad in the league? Maybe they've even got a slightly better one. Maybe they should. I think they should. I think Fulham fans would be well within their right to be thinking they can achieve 10th in the league. And they haven't done. I think there was a disappointing end to the season. But over the course of the season, I think they've been all right. I think they've had some good individual performers like Leno, like Bassey, Robinson, Lukic, Iwobi. I think they've been their better players. I think there's been sometimes players haven't really turned up. I think Smith Rowe had a really poor season. I think he was a big signing, hasn't quite lived up to the expectation perhaps. Maybe that's unfair of me for expecting too much. But I think Fulham have just been a bit meh. But I think the possibility, the potential for them to have a better season was there. They just didn't take it. Right then, Wolves. I'm going to put in meh. I completely understand that people disagree with all these, by the way. As we say, there's no right or wrong answer. I think if you try and argue that, Man United shouldn't be in the bottom one or Liverpool shouldn't be in the top one, I think you're going to have a bit of a struggle there. But in terms of Brighton and Brentford and Fulham and Wolves, very, very debatable. At the end of the day, we're sticking 20 teams into 5 different categories. The possibilities, the combinations you can have is ridiculous. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, I don't know. I shouldn't say hundreds of thousands, maybe not that much, but you get my point. Anyway, Wolves, I'm putting them in meh. And the reason being, because if I go back to the start of the season, my pre-season prediction for Wolves was that they'd struggle, that they'd be in a relegation battle. And I don't think they looked like they could have been, but they weren't really by the end of it. By 2/3 into the season, they were, as soon as Pereira came in and won a couple of games, they were fine. Finishing up 16, so it's not a great league position to be in. But when you look at the 17, the every team bar the 3 promoted ones, Wolves have got one of the weakest teams, right? I think that's fair. They've got some star quality in there with Cunha and Andre and Gomez and Knight Nuri. And Larsson's ended up having a really good season, but there's that other number 10 role, but someone like Sarabia or Bellegarde, and then you've got, I think Semedo's okay at best. Their defence is poor. They addressed it in January with that centre-back's name I always forget and how to pronounce it, Agabadu. He's come in, he's looked fantastically good. But the rest of the defence, not great. I'm not a fan of Jose Sa. So I think they've actually got like one of the weaker teams of the Premier League teams. Them and Everton would be 16 and 17 if I was to do a list. So I think they are where I expected them to be. O'Neill was pretty poor. Pereira's come in and done really well, but they finished the season pretty poorly. They won 6 in a row, got beat by Man City, and ended up having a bad end. They went into the final game of the season. They went into the final game of the season 14th in the league, which would have been I wouldn't have quite moved them up to decent, but it would have been a better meh. So it's a low meh for me. It's what I expected. It is average. Whereas I think Fulham can be disappointed they didn't get top 10. I'm not sure Wolves can. They just don't have a very good squad, and I think we've seen that this season. Ipswich Town, I'm going to put in pretty poor. And the reason being is because essentially they had a League One team. Back-to-back promotions, incredible story. Came up, invested heavily. They had a League One team. And I think they invested pretty well. I look at the Leicester squad, Southampton squad, and the Ipswich squad. I prefer the Ipswich one, if I'm honest with you. They did that in one summer. It was always going to be a tough task. They had to get everything right. Every transfer had to be right. Their marquee signing didn't work out. Calvin Phillips, that was the big one. That's the one with lots of Premier League experience. You come in, and he does well. They might have a different season. It was a bad move in the end. But I get why they did it. I get why they went and got him. It's hard because as a West Ham fan, I know how bad Phillips was with us. But if you didn't watch West Ham, you may not know just how stinky. Callum Phillips was being stinky for last season and his time at West Ham. Finished. That's a new category for him. Maybe going to Ellen Road will give him a new lease of life. But I think Ipswich gambled. And I understand why they did what they did. It just didn't work. And I think, halfway through the season, they were making a bit of an effort at staying up. In the end, they never got close. They never got close. I mean, looking at it now, they finished on 22 points, 16 points behind Spurs, 16 points behind the worst Tottenham side we've seen in years. Wolves finished 4 points above them, above Tottenham, so that's 20 points. Ipswich were 20 points behind Wolves. That is how big a gap it is. We've already established that, you were to add on 22 points to Manchester United, they would jump up to 64 points. That would put them 8th place. So the gap between Ipswich and Man U is the same between Man U and 8th. That's how big the gap is. But I don't want to put Ipswich in the complete stinky because I have a lot of sympathy for them. Essentially, they had players in that team that were playing in the Premier League, that were playing in League One. It's not the same set of circumstances that Southampton and Leicester City had when they got promoted, as far as I'm concerned. The task was much greater, and I think they can go down, maybe not quite with the heads held high, but there is an element of me that thinks, you're all right. It's not an embarrassing season. It's embarrassing for Southampton. It's embarrassing for Leicester, but I don't really feel that Ipswich did get embarrassed, and I think it's maybe because my expectation for them was it's very patronising, but almost enjoy it while it lasts. Because for them to stay up would have taken something remarkable. If Ipswich stayed up, that would have been a greater achievement than Liverpool winning the league. It would have been a greater achievement than Newcastle getting Champions League football, as far as I'm concerned. They needed to do something on that level. They didn't manage it. They've gone back down, but I'm not putting them in the bottom category. Maybe I'm a bit biased. Maybe there is a bit of I don't know. I don't have any affiliation to Ipswich, but I don't know. The romance of them coming up back-to-back promotions, maybe that's overriding it, but I just don't think it was terrible. Right, Crystal Palace, FA Cup winners, right up to fantastic. 12th in the league. As far as domestic season goes in the Premier League, that's all right for Crystal Palace. That's okay. But they won the FA Cup. That overrides everything. That puts you into the fantastic category as far as I'm concerned. Incredible achievement. The first ever major trophy in football. I always say you can't get better than that. You can. You could have also finished in 8th place in the league as well as winning the FA Cup. But who cares? Not Crystal Palace. Dean Henderson definitely doesn't either. Good song, by the way. If I could put a tier list of songs, Dean Henderson's chant would be in fantastic as well. One of the best ones. Get that one up there. Chelsea would be in stinky, by the way. Just shouting your team name over and over does not class as a chant. That's just repetitive shouting. Anyway, Palace, fantastic season. Well done. My team, West Ham, they're going in stinky. I appreciate neutrals might think that's a bit harsh. You weren't that bad. We were terrible. We deserved to be in a relegation battle. We weren't just because of the other teams. We finished 14th, but the context around that is that we won 2 of our last 3. One against a Man United team that didn't care, and the other one against an Ipswich team who also didn't care. We've had a stinky season. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh and I should put us in pretty poor, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel terrible. The only way it could have been worse is getting relegated, but we couldn't get relegated because the teams below us weren't good enough. We've somehow managed to scrape together 43 points. I'm still not sure how we managed it, but we got 43 points, finished 14th. And as a neutral, outside looking in, it probably doesn't look that bad, but the football was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It's been a very unenjoyable season. I want to say a forgetful season, but it's not. I'm going to remember it, but for the wrong reasons. And that's the worst thing. Leicester City, you're going in stinky as well. A badly run club with 2 bad appointments. I don't think Steve Cooper was the best one. I understand that when they sacked him, he was outside the relegation zone, but it felt very unsustainable that they were very fortunate to have that many points on board, and it wasn't that much. I understand why they sacked him. I don't think they should have got him in the first place, but I get why they thought, don't know about this. But to go get Ruud van Nistelrooy, I mean, it was a complete gamble. A complete gamble. And I just don't think that's the time or the place to do it, really. If you're an established Premier League club, I think you can take a gamble on someone like Van Nistelrooy, because if it goes wrong, well, West Ham were that. We gambled on Lopetegui and then Potter, and it's not worked, but we finished 14th. Our gamble went wrong, and that's what happened. When you're Leicester or Southampton or Ipswich or Wolves in that case, if you're going to do a gamble, you've got to make sure you get it right. Otherwise, these are the consequences. Because now, after a bad summer transfer window, signing players like Jordan Ayew, for example, you're now stuck with them in the Championship with big wages. No one's going to come get them because they've just played poorly in the Premier League. So no Premier League club is going to be keen to take those players off your hands. You're now stuck with them in the Championship. You've got no manager. You're a badly run club. The fans have had enough. I don't think this season could have been much worse. The only good thing about Leicester City this season was Jamie Vardy. That was it. At least Leicester City fans had a story. They had Vardy scoring at the age of 101 in the Premier League. And then he's leaving Leicester now. So they got that romance. He scored in his last ever game for Leicester City. 500 games, 200 goals. I mean, how pleasing is that? But imagine Leicester City fans didn't even have Jamie Vardy. They'd be a Southampton fan. Right, 5 teams left. There is a 5th one at the end there in Spurs. I'm leaving them till the end on purpose. The rest of it's random except Spurs. I chose them to go at the end on purpose. Chelsea, I'm going to put them in decent. I know they won a trophy, but it's not the FA Cup. It's not the Premier League. It's not the Champions League. And I appreciate I'm playing it down and it's a trophy that we won. But listen, we hadn't won a trophy for 43 years. Chelsea, the standards of Chelsea, the expectations of Chelsea are far greater than that of West Ham United. So winning the Conference League, they should have won the Conference League. Have you seen their squad? Now, they've had a good season, though. What I will say about Chelsea is they're closer to fantastic than meh. They're like here for me. But I'm going to drop them down one. They've completely taken apart their team and started to rebuild it. No player over the age of 27 played for Chelsea this season. There's 2 players that are 27, and Nkunku and Tartan. No one 28 or over played for Chelsea. That's incredible. A really young team. So to go on and win the Conference League, that's a good achievement. It's good. That's why you're in that category. It's good. Finishing fourth, it's good for Chelsea. That's why you're in that category. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but I don't feel like they had a fantastic season. I don't feel like they had as good a season as Palace, Nottingham Forest or Liverpool. So I'm going to lead them in decent because I think that's what they had. A decency. They won a trophy they were expected to win. Liverpool weren't expected to win it. Palace weren't expected to win it. Nottingham Forest were not expected to get European football. Chelsea were expected to get Conference League football. Arguably, the overachievement came in the league by getting into the Champions League. Arguably, that was the more impressive thing than winning that tournament. But as a result, I think it's hard for me to look at a team that's had millions and millions spent on it and applaud it. I appreciate Liverpool is hardly a team that's been put together in the charity shop. But they won the Premier League title. Chelsea have a side where the players have come from Harrods and they've gone and won the Lidl Cup. I can't bring myself to treat them the same as the other three. Some leave them indecent. You can do what you want, but I'm leaving them where I put them, indecent. As for Everton, I'm going to put them in meh. Dyche had them lingering in a relegation battle, didn't he? Last season at Goodison Park, and you're watching that football. He finally got the sack, a bit late, but he went. David Moyes has come in, done fantastically well. Since he won his first game in charge of Everton, I think only Liverpool's picked up more points than Everton. Incredible, absolutely incredible. He went in there, they just started winning and kept on winning and just, I say cruised away, they sped off. Any sign of a relegation battle was over within a couple of weeks after David Moyes rocked up at Goodison Park. But he gave them something to enjoy the last few weeks. So I think I'm going to put Everton in meh, because ultimately, where have they finished in the league? They finished 13th in the league, which is okay. But if it was Dyche's time, I'd have him here somewhere. And David Moyes' time, I'd have him in the decent at minimum. So I'm going to go down the middle and put them in meh. They've been all right. Who we got next? Manchester City, you're going in pretty poor. Let's be honest about it. You have to win something. The first time Man City haven't won something since 2016-17 is the same time that Pep Guardiola's gone a season without winning something as well. It's just not been good enough at the Etihad. It didn't come anywhere near laying a glove on Liverpool. At one point, it looked like they were in trouble for qualifying for the Champions League. Now, come the end of the season, they'd comfortably got back in there, but it went to the final game of the season. They left it late, lost in the FA Cup final. It's not been a good season for them, but the standards are so high at Manchester City under Pep Guardiola, aren't they? That it's like they could have come runner-up in Champions League, Premier League and FA Cup, and we'd still be putting them in meh at the best, because that's the standard. They have to win something. It's the price you pay for your own success, isn't it? So I'm going to put Manchester City in pretty poor. But I guess the big difference between them and a lot of the clubs in their current category, are you confident that Brentford will have another decent season next season? Are you confident Palace will have a fantastic one? I'm confident they probably won't. But Man City, I'm confident they will not be in pretty poor in 12 months' time. It wouldn't surprise me we do this tier list at the end of next season and they're in fantastic because they've won 2 trophies. It would not surprise me. So they've had a pretty poor season, but it feels like, and I think that's with Liverpool, it doesn't feel like a one-off, that title. Man City this season, it feels like a one-off, but this is what they've achieved over the last 10 months. Not very much. Newcastle United into fantastic for me. I'm going to move them actually up to here. Get over there. There, I'm going to pop them. I'm going to pop them up at the front. I formed a bit of a soft spot for Newcastle. I don't know why. I think I like the Newcastle fans, and also there's been Newcastle's my favourite city to go to for an away game. The away end's obviously up in the sky and you can't see anything, so when it's a bit cloudy, you're in trouble. But it's a stadium right in the middle of the city centre, loads of pubs around it. Newcastle fans have been class whenever I come across them, and I think because of that, I don't mind them doing well. And they've done well this season. They've got Champions League football. That was it. What was Newcastle's aim this season? I think it was to either win a trophy or get Champions League football. I think either would have been considered a success. They did both. And you look at the ones next to them. Nottingham Forest did fantastic in the league. Liverpool did fantastic in the league. Crystal Palace did all right in the league, but they did fantastic in the FA Cup. Newcastle did fantastic in the league and the Carabao Cup. That's why they're almost like my team of the season, if you like. Howe's done a tremendous job. They play good football. You know, during that run to win the Carabao Cup, they absolutely wiped the floor with Arsenal. Absolutely wiped them with it. And at one point, you know, a few weeks before the end of the season, they looked like they were going to finish second in the Premier League. It was feasible. I think Isak just dipped off towards the end, and injuries, one or two injuries played its part as well. But they still got Champions League football, but that's what matters when the final whistle goes on the last game of the season. Where are you? Because that's what counts. Champions League football. Won the first trophy for 73, 75 years. And Champions League football. I was going to say it can't be better. It could have been, but if you finish 5th or 4th, what difference does it make? Ultimately, the prize is the same. Yeah. Well done, Eddie Howe. Well done, Newcastle. Now, that leaves Spurs. I've left them to the end because I should have used a better badge here. You can just see it, can't you? Yeah, just see it. I'm leaving them in meh for now. I may move them. I've just put them there just to have a discussion. Because if we were talking about their Premier League season, right, their league campaign, they're in stinky. There's no doubt about it. 17th in the league. But they've had real injuries. Not like Arsenal's injuries. Tottenham have had real injuries. Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie, Solanke, Maddison, Vicario. They've had real every player in that Spurs starting 11. If you write down their strongest 11, I'm pretty confident at least 9 of them have picked up an injury, and a lot of them long-term injuries as well. So Postecoglou's had real injuries, and if you take the Spurs back four, Pardo, Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie, and they were to play every single game for 38 games. Now you take the games they've played together this season, and you divide it by the points they've achieved, by the games they've played, and multiply it by 38. They end up in Champions League spots. So when they've got a fully fit team, they are good. They just don't have a fully fit team. And as soon as Tottenham were safe from relegation, which when the team's finishing 17th, you think, oh, that was close. It wasn't though, was it? They were safe quite a few weeks before the end of the season. The minute that happened, Postecoglou just binned off the Premier League and he just focused on the Europa League. And it was the right thing to do. They won a trophy. They won the Europa League, the first trophy since 2006 or 2008, whenever Ramos was there. Nearly 20 years, right? Let's just call it that. That's a huge achievement. They've got Champions League football next season. Tottenham have got the same prize as Newcastle. Tottenham have got a better prize than Villa. So I don't think they can go in stinky. I don't think they can go in pretty poor. I'm not going to put them in meh either. I'm going to put them in decent. And it's purely because they've won a trophy. But that's what football should be about. Memories, winning trophies. Spurs have won one. And trust me, I don't like it. That game in Bilbao was the first time I'd ever supported Man United in a one-off game. I was wanting Man United to win. And it felt weird because from a West Ham stance, it was funny to finish above Man U and Spurs in the league. We were so crap, but yet we still finished above them. It was funny. But that enjoyment lasted for... Well, it didn't really. Because Spurs won the Europa League, it wasn't funny anymore to finish above Tottenham. It was still funny to finish above Man U, but with Spurs, it was gone. That humour was removed the minute they won that Europa League because they've won a trophy. They've got Champions League football next season. So I think they've had a decent season. I think if you offer a Tottenham fan to start a season 17th, but you win the Europa League, I think most would have taken it. Not all of them, but I think most of them would have taken it. because it's changed the conversation. The conversation, it wasn't even a conversation. That night against Chelsea, that was it. Postecoglou cupping his ear at fans and whatever. That was it. It was like people were Postecoglou out, and a lot of them still are. But there's a lot of Spurs fans also at least having a conversation, which is, do we actually sack this guy because he's won us a trophy? So I'm going to put them in decent. I think they've had a decent season purely because of that. Now, here's the mad thing, right? Had they lost that final, they'd be in stinky, and Man United would be up in decent. But they didn't, so Man U staying stinky and Spurs staying decent. Now, don't get me wrong, Spurs are closer to meh than they are fantastic, but I'm going to leave them there. Anyway, that's my tier list. That's my thoughts. That's how I think each Premier League team performed this season. I would like to know what you think of the 20 teams. So get in the comments below. Just 5 categories. Just pop the team in which one you think. Just write them out. Write them out. Fantastic, decent, meh, pretty poor, stinky, and put the clubs in each one. But thank you very much for joining me. If you've made it till the end, what's this? 40 minutes. I thought this was going to be 20 minutes. Crikey, apologies. Hey, if I wait another 2 minutes, I will have the same amount of. I will have minutes as what Man United have points last season. But before you go, please do drop a like on it by clicking the thumbs up. Subscribe to Tartan, and I'll catch up with you in a bit.